Hello and welcome to WSIU InFocus. I'm Brad Palmer. The man who has called over 1,300 Southern Illinois University basketball games, more than 500 SIU football contests, and countless numbers of Salukis baseball games over the past 44 years, announced on May 31st he was stepping away as the voice of the Salukis. Mike Reis has kindly agreed to sit down with us and talk about his decision, his career, and more. Mike, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, and he happily agreed to be part of it too.
Did right away. We didn't have to twist
Thank
your
you
arm.
for having me.
The big question I guess everyone has on their mind is what went into your decision to step away?
No, I thought the first question would be, are you going to do the games in Cancun, since I said they're going to play in Cancun. I had told my two brothers and Joel Sambursky of Liberty Wealth, who handles my money.
Nice plug.
Not necessarily in that order, that I was built up on plugs, Brad, and I didn't have a live read for that. But that this would be the last year. To be a full-time person as I am doing the games, working both for Learfield and for SIU, Learfield owns the radio rights. They both pay my salary. You have to be cut in every day. You have to have a passion for it. And I still had the passion for doing games, and I still do now. But the passion for the day-to-day, the interviews that are involved, there's a 1-hour pregame, there's a prep that's involved in doing it to the level of expectation that we all have, most importantly me have for our product. And I saw it slip a little bit this year. And I had told them that if I feel the same way at the end that I do at the beginning, that this will be it. And I felt the same way at the end. Now, am I retiring? Yes. In order to leave the university, you have to retire. But down the road, if somebody wants me to do a game and I want to do it, if there's a conflict, including Southern, or a year from now, if somebody wants me to do a year and it feels good to me, I'd like to be available to do that. That's why I didn't use the word retirement. I hate when people retire and then come back. It's like you can't make up your mind, but that's the thinking behind it, and I feel that it's time. It's the right decision, though. But it's going to be very, very difficult because it's been a huge part of my life.
That prep work that kind of pushed you out the door, if you will, that you talked about. Those hour-long pregame shows, I don't know that people realize what goes into that. I mean, they listen to them and all, but you have interviews during it. You have old highlights that you play in flashback segments. You play the highlights from the previous game. So there's a lot that goes into that before the 2 or 3 hour broadcast of the game itself.
Well, and for a couple of years, you lived through it as the guy that pushed all the buttons. And so there is work to it. But look, I don't want sympathy for that. That's part of the job. I'm well paid. It's a good job. The next person has a good job coming in, and I'm very thankful for that. But it was work, and you better want to do it right. Now, we could turn the microphones on an hour before tip-off or kickoff and just talk for an hour, but I don't think we could hold an audience doing that. And I don't want to talk for an hour, and the people that I work with don't want to talk with me for an hour about this. And so I think you have to put some work into it. You have to create some information. You have to create some content that somebody might worth listening to. And then in the expanded world of social media, share it that way too, because you know that not everybody's going to listen to every minute of every game. And so, but if you don't, the offshoot of the hour pregame is not being able to, if you're not spending the time you should prepping, now all of a sudden you're going to make mistakes. And I felt like I could correct the mistakes that I made, just like I did there, but the ones that I didn't correct, those numbers were going to multiply as time went on. And I always said I would know before everybody else, and I would rather go a year too early than a year too late.
You always held yourself to very high standards, and obviously that seems to have played into this decision, because even though I think the listeners themselves would never have noticed that you had slipped in your perception, you certainly noticed it.
I hope so.
All those emails I got, no, but anyway, but the fact that you held yourself to such high standards is I guess that played into your decision here as well.
Yes, yeah, because it would bother me, and it would bother me. And then there were a couple times I knew I'd made mistakes and it didn't bother me. And so that guy told me the other day in Carbondale, one of the things that I would do too frequently was, and it's just working on instinct, I might say something like, There's a timeout. Southern leads it 7-6. Southern might be behind 7-6. And this guy comes up to me and says, I heard you get the score wrong a couple times, but I never thought it was that serious. But that's part of it. And that's part of doing it right. And the job that's been created and what we have established since I started doing it in 78, 79 with the resources to do it right and to do it to a bigger level than the market deserves a better outcome than what I felt I was doing. And if I didn't have the passion to fix it, that would have been the next stretch after not having the passion to do it. I still love the games now. And could I do the games next year? Of course I could do the games next year and I think do them well enough. But it just feels right now. It just feels like it should be done now.
What are your thoughts on the overwhelming response you've received since you made the announcement on social media?
Well, it stunned me. I kind of play my cards personally close to the vest personally. I don't let very many people in. But I knew that it was important here, but I didn't expect that. I didn't expect all that. It was overwhelming. It was gratifying. I think I replied to everybody in some form or fashion, but it was just, it was totally overwhelming. That part I was stunned. That part, frankly, causes you to rethink what you've done. But now, as we tape this, nobody says anything anymore. So it feels like I know it's the right thing to do, but that was extremely flattering.
You mentioned that your two brothers and Joel Sambursky, your money man,
Yes.
that you had to clear it with before anybody else, right? That you could afford to retire. They were the only ones that knew ahead of time.
Right.
How long ago did you make this decision? How long have you been sitting with this?
Well, since March of 22, when baseball was just about to start. Actually, Brad, I told Denham I was going to quit after the 21-22 season. And I changed my mind at the end of that season. I was mad at a lot of people and a lot of things, some in and out of my control. And so I told them at the end, those same three people, I said, I'm not going to do this after the 22 season. It's not right. Plus, I hadn't done a whole lot of preparation mechanically to step down. And I'm glad I did, because I would have left angry after the 22 season for a number of things. But what this past year taught me was, with a lot of self-inspection, was that the things that bothered me in 21-22, the things that didn't involve me, what I really was upset about is I wasn't doing the job as well as I thought I should be doing it. And I wasn't necessarily having the fun, nor was I putting the time in that I had. And so this past year verified that I made the right call by not going after the 22 season.
What are you proudest of during your career?
I'm proudest of the fact that because when I started out, WCIL radio and Carbondale had the rights, and the McCrory Corporation owned it. Whether they owned it or the succession of people that owned it afterwards, then leading to 2008 when I went to work for SIU and for Learfield, they provided the resources to hire good people, both in the day-to-day. I was a sportscaster then. That's my training is as a reporter. We had 2 full-time people up until the mid-'80s or up to the late 80s. We had 2 full-time people and 3 part-time people in the sports department at WCIL Radio. Heck, there are radio stations now without 5 employees. Now the total payroll was about $20,000 among the 5 of us. But so now, because of that, because you have the resources and you create an attractive setup for people, now all of a sudden you have a bunch of people working for you. And this is a long-winded way of saying that I'm proudest most that we have about 75 people in the business somehow, either communications, management, on air, any of those things, news, some business, some form or fashion in the communications business, management. I'm proudest of that, and including people in D1 play-by-play, and so that's the part I'm most proud of. And then after that, of course, the games, and In fact, one of the things about the overwhelming response, Brad, to me meant that what we did was right because we prioritized the fan. We prioritized the listener. And that's who responded. The response didn't come necessarily from athletes, players, coaches, administrators, who sometimes are the focus of broadcasts. But I was fortunate that I wasn't brought up that way, but was able to continue that way. And in the end, I think we turned out a product that people really liked.
Your connection to Saluki athletics is obvious, but I remember at the Forever SIU Gala in 2017, you were speaking.
Oh, yeah.
And you talked about how your connection with the university as a whole has made your life better. Well, what does SIU itself mean to you?
Well, I'm the person that I am because of it. I don't want to get too milk toasty about what SIU has done because SIU did give an opportunity. Actually, WCIO Radio gave me the first opportunity, and then WSIU. And it's interesting to be in this studio, which is part of where I began in 1976 or whatever, because you have to do something with it. I mean, we're not handed anything. It was highly competitive when I came to Southern. It was the number 3 radio television school in the country. And there were a bunch of people who ended up in major markets that I worked with. And I was like 5th on the pecking order as a sophomore. And so it was super, super competitive. So I don't think anything was handed to any of us. I think we earned it. But I think that's Southern helped form me as a person, and I think I'm a better person as a consequence of being at Southern and being around diversity. I grew up in all white, and it would have continued that way if I didn't come here. I didn't go to school with African Americans till I was 19 years old. There weren't any in the schools that I went to. And so that was different. I didn't go to school with anybody in a wheelchair until I was 19 years old. This area, I never knew about a rural area. I didn't know where Carbondale was, let alone any of that. So I know that growing up on the west side of Cincinnati and growing up in South suburban Cleveland and then suburban Chicago, which was all white, I know which way I was headed, the way things were going in the 70s. That was my environment. So I'm so glad I came here. And it's made me a more rounded person. I like to think a better person. I had a lot of fun too while doing this. And I'm a different person than I was in high school and late in grade school. And I think a much better person too.
You were fortunate, I think, in the fact that you had a lot of broadcasting partners who stayed with you for a long time. That doesn't always happen. And tell me about the stability that provided you and the fact that you were able to work with other guys for so long.
Well, it enables you to concentrate on yourself. We had a stretch there where we had 3 and 4 in basketball, and that was wrong. We were going to end that right away because our product was not good. And so I was able to, I think, experience it from both ends. Greg Sterick did the games for 40-some years. Gene Green did them in the mid-20s. It seems like Trude has always done the games, but he hasn't always done the games, and he's there when we call. I think that I'm at my best when I can worry about myself. And as selfish as that sounds, I think in my role, or at least the role that we've created and the importance of the play-by-play person in the broadcast, that if I have to worry about engineering, if I have to worry about whether the other person is prepared, whether the other person is qualified, any of the things, we're going to be a mess. Because then I'll start delving into areas that I shouldn't be delving into. And so I don't want to say that a lot of times we complete each other's sentences because that sounds a little too weird. But I think that's very true. And I think that you find that when you have teams that work together, as long as I was fortunate to be able to. And also, like, these guys didn't work for free. And so that's back to the resources thing, and we've had that here.
We're fortunate enough to be joined on the set by 2 of those former colleagues of Mr. Reis's, and Gene Green, who 24 years as the football analyst with Mike in the booth, and Mike Trude, who started back, over 40 years ago with Mike in WCIL, and now you've come full circle yourself, and you were in the football booth again with him in what turned out to be his last season of calling Saluki games. Gene, let me ask you, what was your reaction to Mike's announcement a few weeks ago?
I don't think I was really that surprised. I mean, we hadn't really talked about a timeline of when he may decide to step away, but the personal decision didn't necessarily surprise me that much. And I was actually happy about it the most because he's deserved to go out on his own terms, and that's what this became, is he set the timeline, which that's the way it should have been.
Mike, same question.
Yeah, when he asked me when Gene retired from doing the color, Mike asked me if I was interested, and I said absolutely. And the very first year I did Saluki football was the '83 national championship season. So what a great time that was. And now knowing that this was the last year for Mike as well. But one of the conversations that Mike and I had was, he said, now, this may be different from how we used to do things in the way that we're chatting. He said, but I want to get the play right. So if somewhere along the line I miss a receiver or I miss this, I want you to correct me on the air. And I don't think I would have ever done that early on in doing the games. And I was even hesitant this year. It didn't happen a lot, but there were times when I would notice something and I would bring it up, and we might go to a break and he would say, thanks, we got it right. And I think getting it right was always so much more important to him than a lot of people would think. And then when he told me that he was, thinking of that this was going to, actually he told me the day before he announced everything that it was going to be it, I said, I'm just happy that you get to do this on your own terms, because they're going to try to talk you out of it. They're going to say, just do the games, just do this. But he has such an ownership over the entire, as you know, ownership over the entire product, that just doing one thing would drive him up a wall, because he wouldn't have the control over the pregame, over this, over that. And so, as he mentioned, he doesn't want to have to worry about what Gene does or what I do or what you did as an engineer at the time. He just wants to be able to concentrate on his own things. And so I think that was weighing on his mind as well.
You've had the unique perspective in that you got to work with the young Reis, and now I'll call it the more experienced Reis. Okay,
Old is all right.
What was that experience like? You mentioned he told you going into this that there have been some changes, but I'm sure personally he's a different person than he was 40 plus years ago.
So much more tolerant, without question. I mean, he's a year older than I am, but he was my boss. When he was a year older than me, he was 21 and I was 20 or 20, something along those lines. And I didn't know anything about radio television. I had just started at Southern. There was an ad, or I don't know if they're ad in the paper or word of mouth. And I went and talked with him, and we had a nice initial chat at his office, and discovered we had the same birthday, not date of birth, but same birthday. And that we're both from the suburbs of Chicago, and it was a really nice start to what turned out to be a really phenomenal relationship. And what I learned immediately from Mike was writing was the most important thing. So when I would do a story for the radio and the lead wasn't any good, he would say, your lead is not any good. You need to catch them. You've got to get, so learning how to write helped me tremendously, not just in working in radio and television, but in doing everything in anything to do with journalism or in the media.
Mike Reis, you've called College World Series games, the national championship for football, a pair of Sweet 16 basketball seasons. Maybe not the most memorable, but what would you say is the most important game that you've called for SIU, one that made maybe the most impact?
I would think the 2002 NCAA tournament in Chicago, slightly ahead of the NCAA tournament in 2007 in Columbus. Both teams went to the Sweet 16, so both teams won their first two rounds. But 2002 was the first time. Now, the College World Series, I was 21 years old in 1977 and threw up the morning of the game, and hadn't really done the games all year, but the CIL said, let's do the World Series. And I said, of course. And of course, national championship in football, 83. But those are bigger stages now than they were then. The 02 NCAA tournament was Southern's first time on a national stage. And so that's the one that stands out. And 02 slightly ahead of 07, simply because that was the first one.
Over the defensive steal. Roland has a half court. Into the front court, 2-on-1. Over to Marcus. Lob for Roland. Roland has 12. Southern can feel it. A date on Sunday is in the offing. The Salukis by 15, 8 minutes left.
Long there, we had to do some damage, so, once we got against that Texas Tech, man, Bobby Knight, all I was reading about and hearing on TV on, ESPN and College Hoops Tonight is Bobby Knight this, Bobby Knight that, season on the brink. It just felt like, we were really, really the underdogs that game.
Fouls into the front court, top of the circle. Southern up 76, 68, 18-footer, no good. Rebounded by Ellis, 1 second left, turn around shot, blocked by Roberts. Ball game, ball game. Dogs are in the final 32.
Well, it is a special season and a special group of players and a great fan base that got into it. I think we captured a lot of people's hearts this year, and I think not only will we remember it, but the people here in the Carbondale area, the Southern Illinois area, will remember it for a long time. So it is a special season.
To the corner, Brooks. Baseline drive left. Out to Hairston it goes. Back to Brooks in the corner for a 3 in the lead. Yes! DB with 5 in a row. He has 8 in the ball game. Southern is up.
And we had goals this year, and we had reached every one of them, and that was our last goal, and to know that we accomplished it, and to know that everything that we tried to do this season, that it was worthwhile and we did accomplish it.
Greatest season, man. It's been amazing, man. It's just so much stuff that happened in 1 year, man. I'll remember for a long time.
On the inbound look, and throw it deep in the backcourt. Hairston has it, dribbles it out. Sweet 16, baby. Southern's there. Southern's there. Southern's in the Sweet 16.
Dean, you worked with Mike, as we said, for 24 years in the football booth. Is there a moment or a game that stands out to you that you think back on quite often?
Well, I think, probably one of the more important games to me was when Southern finally broke that long losing streak to Western Illinois when Jerry Kill was the coach. And realistically, that was the linchpin of turning the whole program around. And turning the program around probably kept the program from being dropped. It led to this new stadium, which is not brand new anymore, but nonetheless. So that was a big moment.
Now it's down to what could be the final play of the game. 5 seconds left. It's second down.
And goal to go.
Southern's out of timeouts.
For Southern Illinois, for the Western
52 to 48. 3 receivers to the right side, the wide side. Sambursky's in shotgun. Takes the snap, low snap. Rolls right. Has time. Looking. Holding. Who does he throw? It's caught by Robinson.
Get to change back to something about the way things have changed over the years. Mike and I worked together, did a lot of baseball first, and then football, just the two of us for years. So we got pretty good not stepping on each other, which, the listeners may not notice that we're in step like that, but we certainly do. But I think a big transition was when all of a sudden we had the resources to add a sideline reporter. And when Joel Sambursky came on board, Mike called me up and said that this was going to happen. And, you're so used to that situation being, and let's go down to Bob. Bob, what do you got for us? And he said, it's not what it's going to be. He said, he's got a live mic. He's a third guy on this broadcast. And so it's the old 3-man weave. How will this work? And I think one of the things I'm most proud of is I think you can almost count on one hand the number of times that either Joel or, Connor James did such a good job after Joel. We rarely stepped on each other. And I think that seamless conversation maybe wasn't noticed by the listeners, but boy, we noticed it, that somehow or another we could just tell the nuances of our voices when it would slow down. Or it just didn't happen very often. I'm very proud of that.
Absolutely. Our time's growing short, but Mike, I wanted to ask you about how would you like to be remembered? I mean, not this is in your memoriam or anything, but how would you like to be remembered? As you...
Somebody said the other day, you get to hear this you hear this while you're still alive. A lot to be said for that. I think that I think in the end, while I'm proudest of the alums, and I'm proudest of a lot of things, I think in the end, the thing I'm best at is is the play-by-play. And if people would, in the end, say the listener was important, he was able to describe the play, he gave the score was right most of the time, and he was fair. If people would say that, I could follow the ball. The best compliment we ever get is from blind people who listen. Excuse me, and they say they can follow the ball while they're listening on the radio. If people would say that, then I would be very happy at that.
Tremendous. Mike Reis, thank you so much for
Thank
spending
you,
some
Brad.
time.
Mike
Gene
and
Green,
Gene,
Mike Turek.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thanks, Brad.
absolutely. I'm glad you
Brad.
all could spend some time with us here and on the program, and it's been great listening to you all, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime down the road. You never know. Mike left the door open a little bit, so you never know, all right? But that's going to wrap up this edition of In Focus on WSIU. Again, thanks to the Mikes and Gene. For them, I'm Brad Palmer. And of course, go Dogs!